Hey everybody! Today I want to show you 10 games that are considered as RPGs, but in reality, they might just not be. Some I'm pretty sure they aren't, but some others, I honestly can't decide. So let's begin. Number 10, Muramasa the Demon Blade. Muramasa has always been that one game half the world says it's not an RPG. Why would it be? It's mostly a 2D hack and slash with two main characters that you can beat in 5 hours each. Barely any interaction with NPCs, the towns you visit are bare bones and are even treated as action stages too. Equipment and skill systems are basically one and the same, relying on equipping swords and crafting them. So there's a heck of a lot of action games or hack and slash games with the same features that everyone knows aren't RPGs. However, I'm sure you've seen me including this game in a lot of JRPG related videos, right? Well, Muramasa has strong character development, even if it's a short story. The leveling system includes grinding, as this is a very challenging game, so you can go around different areas to fight enemies for levels. Even though NPC and town interactions are small, the fact remains that they're still there, and the skill tree, while attached to the different swords, it just resembles a lot the one seen in many JRPGs. But we still have the problem that it's 90% action, 10% dialogue, that it's not a retro game and 5 hours it's just too short for an RPG, and that its RPG elements, while strong, do not stand out that much. So it's debatable. It does feel like an action RPG to me, but I wouldn't argue if somebody told me it's just not. Number 9, Little Witch Nobeta. This game came out a few months ago and I've seen a lot of people treating it as an RPG. I'm not sure why. You play as Nobeta in search for a valuable treasure accompanied by a cat creature. She can fight with her staff, executing weak attacks, but the real fun is in the magic system. Acting a bit like a third-person shooter, you just aim and fire bullets of the 4 different magic you'll get throughout the game. So I do see the RPG elements, but Muramasa has way more of them and it feels like one. Nobeta just doesn't. Her adventure takes place in a giant castle with no towns to visit, close to zero NPC interaction, a leveling system that's just kinda there, bare bones character development, and finally a very short journey again. I mentioned you level up, so let's talk about that. In these statues, you can increase her stats if you want to, but also increase the magic power. You've got 4 different magic spells like I mentioned, and can actually utilize them as skills to solve puzzles or to get to inaccessible areas. But that's just it! Plenty action adventure games have these small elements that are just there to give variety to the gameplay. Little Witch Nobeta is a good game, but it's definitely not an RPG. Number 8, Fragile Dreams. This Wii exclusive has been responsible for many divisive arguments in the past. Developed by Tree Crescendo, mainly by Kentaro Kawashima, it's an adventure game with horror elements. Oh, and RPG elements too, of course. You play as Seto in a world where most of humanity has vanished. However, ghosts are wandering around the different ruined buildings and other locations. To fight them, Seto uses any weapon he can find, but also a flashlight to prevent them from attacking or to stun them temporarily. So you'll mostly traverse dark areas and ruined places to find items, including memory items. You can save your game at bonfires and check out these memory items to see the memories of the dead. So I get it. In terms of exploration, you've got your items, your save points, your puzzles, your constant dialogue with your AI companion, and even a merchant you can buy stuff from. But those are elements found in a lot of non-RPG games out there. However, you do level up here and you can grind if you want to get stronger. That right there is the crucial factor that makes people call it an RPG, but it just doesn't feel like one to me. Most of what you do is explore, fight, solve puzzles and watch cutscenes. Plus, both the level and character progression are almost insignificant. It's a story-driven game, linear, with no real role-playing whatsoever. And while you do get character development, like I said, the story isn't just that long, and therefore the development is barely sufficient. In conclusion, I just don't see it as an RPG, but I can understand why some people call it as such. Number 7. Dokapon Kingdom. Okay, this game was originally released on PS2 and then on the Wii. Recently, a remaster on Switch happened and I played it again. There's a sequel on the DS, but it's kinda lame. This remaster is based on the Wii version, the best one. It's a pretty fun party game. It just plays out with RPG features a lot, but it's just that, a party game. You know, like Mario Party, you have a board and this roulette that acts as the dice, deciding how many steps you will move. You can play solo or compete against AI or against people online or in real life. But instead of minigames like in Mario Party, you get into a random battle if you land on an empty spot. Click the action button and the turn order will be decided between you and your opponent, be it a monster or another player. Both will act twice, and each action you select cancels the other one, kinda like in a triangle attack system. After 2 turns, if you defeated the monster, you'll win, gain money and experience. So you do level up here. If you didn't win, you'll lose a turn and will have to complete the battle on your next one. Eventually you move on to the next stage where shops will be available if you land on them, or monsters terrorizing small towns and you can liberate them, etc. So as you can see, it's clearly not an RPG. I've treated it as such, but only a few times before in certain videos, because it's trying to simulate one with some of its features like the turn-based combat and its leveling system. But where's the character development? Where's the story progression? Where's the real role-playing here? It's just a competition to play with other people and that's it. You know what? It reminds me of Battle Hunter on the PS1. Number 6. Code of Princess. Here's another one I've treated multiple times as an action RPG. That's cause it kinda is, but it's also arguably not. The same thing happened back then with Guardian Heroes on the Sega Saturn, then with its sequel for the Game Boy Advance. Both had RPG elements but only the bare minimum. 2D beat-em-ups where you can level up and gain abilities. Code of Princess is actually no different than that. So why is it that me and other people treat it as an action RPG? You'll advance the story through small animated cutscenes and in-game dialogue, but you'll always start from this menu. Here, you can select which character you'll control during battle. Also, you equip your characters with different accessories that'll affect their stats. A shop can also be used, but that's just it. No skill tree, no customization, only a leveling system that happens naturally by just fighting. Then you'll start the next chapter, read some dialogue, watch some scenes maybe, and fight in stages. You can move up or down on different layers to attack your enemies. Obviously every character controls very differently, but you can beat the entire game with just one if you want to. You do have an HP and MP bar, which increase after you level up. So is it really an RPG? Actually, based on the facts and the technical aspects of it, it's just not. It's merely a beat 'em up with RPG elements you can finish in like 4 hours if you're good enough. Why do I personally then treat it as one? Simply because of how the story is told, how the game plays, and how you progress in both. Feels like one to me. But in no way would I ever win an argument or even attempt one to convince others it is. I just like to cover it every now and then because it's a really good game. Number 5. Parasite Eve III Birthday. Here's the black sheep in the Parasite Eve trilogy. In fact, I could also throw here the second one, but I haven't touched it in such a long time. I'd need to go back to it and decide if it's really an RPG or not. The third birthday, however, will definitely not give you the impression of being one. But it does have strong RPG elements. Check it out! You play as an amnesiac Aya who is sent to missions with other soldiers to fight the twisted, horrible and dangerous creatures, but unlike its predecessors, this is a third-person shooter. You just run around firing your guns, hiding to avoid damage and the like. Aya can somehow take over one of her NPC allies if they're dead by merely teleporting herself inside their bodies. Yeah, there's a reason why this game's story and gameplay mechanics were heavily criticized. I mean, the ideas are good, but how in blazes can we call this Parasite Eve? But I digress. Aya levels up by fighting, so that's one RPG element there. Her health and energy levels increase by leveling up. Weapons can also level up depending on how much you use them. Aya's stats can also be customized, but only if you find items called over energy clips. These things grant a 3x3 grid that can boost her stats or abilities. It's surprising, I know, how many RPG elements are there for Aya's performance in battle, but apart from that, there's nothing that can truly make it stand out as an RPG. It just doesn't feel like one. It's mostly a third-person shooter with some elements, most of them found in a lot of regular video games nowadays. Story and character progression is strong though, but not enough to see a true development for Aya or anybody else really. There's not much to use to argue against someone calling it an RPG, but being one for distinguishing itself as one was notoriously not the intent of the developers. Number 4. Advance Wars. Once again, we're talking about a game that barely focuses on its story. It does have a decent amount of dialogue though, especially throughout its many tutorials, but it's not really an RPG. You see, in strategy RPGs, you control units that have stats, that have personal growth. They level up and their stats increase, so the outcome of every battle they participate in depends a lot on those very same stats, on those very same levels. In Advance Wars, there is no such thing. The units you control are generic infantry soldiers, tanks, airships and whatnot, not a single one with that personal growth. All they have is HP and their performance in battle depends on it, on the terrain, on their positioning and on the RNG, meaning the accuracy, which is also affected by stuff not related to their own stats whatsoever. Yes, you have commanders as the main characters, but they are just that, commanders. They don't participate in battle directly and there's nothing RPG-wise for them. Actually, dare I say, not even a good character development, but I can't really criticize that since I didn't get very far into it. I've only played this first game and barely touched the others, so I can't comment on the rest. Let me know if they have more RPG elements, because this first game is definitely not what I would personally call an RPG. It does kinda feel like one because of how the story and dialogue are carried out though, so I wouldn't argue that much against someone calling it an RPG. But it's just not. What? It's not! Number 3. Harvest Moon. For years I've wondered why some people see this series as RPGs. I can only speak for a couple of them though, the original Super Nintendo release and one on the PS2 whose name I can't even remember. I'm not a fan of this series. Why? Because they're not RPGs! There isn't a traditional leveling system, there isn't a character progression story-wise, there's not even fighting at all! I don't know if you can fight in the Story of Seasons series, but in the Harvest Moon games I played, there was zero fighting. The only role-playing aspect I saw in the titles I engaged with was the simulation itself. You farm and that's it. You gotta plan your tasks for the next day, take care of your fields, get the required items, plant them, farm them, the end. Well, I guess you can talk to other people and engage in some kind of story. I've heard you can even marry in some of these games. Apart from that, there's just no RPG elements like in other games we've seen here. I have no idea why some people treat them as such. No idea whatsoever. It's almost infuriating to see them considered like ones when they're clearly a completely different genre. Next, we'll see people saying SimCity is an RPG series for F's sake. Number 2, the Souls series. Alright, this is the most controversial one. I personally think of some of them as action RPGs like the Souls series, Bloodborne included, but games like Sekiro were a different story. However, I only played that game for like an hour and can't talk much about it. Why I consider the others as RPGs is merely because they not only feel like one, but also because the elements are very strong here. My only problem though is that they're all bare bones in terms of story. They have rich lore and several character interactions, but it's mostly with NPCs. You don't really explore around to interact with people, you don't even have character development at all in any of these games. But gameplay wise, you make progress almost like in a role-playing game. You go around and fight enemies, explore ruins and areas, find items, equip stuff, customize stuff, learn abilities, use different weapons, level up, etc. But wait, Doesn't that sound like what most action-adventure games do nowadays? See the problem now? This is why a lot of people refuse to even acknowledge any of them as RPGs. Forget about the J that stands for Japanese. Are these even role-playing games at all? Like I said, they do feel like ones to me. Not just because you depend mostly on those RPG elements a lot, unless you just get really good at them, but also because the gameplay progression adds more technical features than your average hack and slash. That's just me though. Without the traditional storytelling and character development of RPGs, it's hard to argue if these games belong in the genre or not. What do you think? Number 1. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Why Zelda 2 and not the entire Legend of Zelda series? Because honestly I haven't really played anything beyond Majora's Mask, haven't even played Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, which are allegedly the ones with stronger RPG elements. The entire series has been an endless debate between gamers and even its developers to decide if they're action RPGs or not. I see the elements in the ones that I've played, and hell, they do have more storytelling than the Soul series at least. However, some of them are more lacking in these elements, like the very first one on the NES. I see how it influenced other games in the genre, but if you play it, it's just really hard to feel like you're playing an RPG. Personally, I feel the same way with others like A Link to the Past, for example. There's just games that focus 90% on their gameplay than anything else. The second one, however, is an entirely different story. That's why I picked it over the others. It's the one most people will argue it's an RPG, but that is mostly for two things. One, because you enter towns and talk to people, even though that is only done to get close to make progress. And second, because you grind. You do not, however, level up per se here. You got a heart system like in most Zelda games out there, but you can grind to increase the amount of hearts, which are basically your health. But there's just no other stats, no skill tree, no customization whatsoever, no real leveling system, no character development, no real NPC interaction. I mean, I see the elements, but it's 90% a regular side-scroller. Just because you have an overworld where you get into random battles doesn't mean you're role-playing like in Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. Like I mentioned, it's one controversial bastard in the topic itself. It's hard to convince people it's not an RPG, but hell, I see more RPG elements in the 64 titles, but I also understand this game is from the 80s, and most RPGs from this era were bare bones in their elements, and we're only just laying the basis for more exact definitions in the future. So, is Zelda 2 an action RPG? Not in my opinion, but it isn't hard to see why other people think otherwise. Are the other Zelda games RPGs? I can only speak for the ones I put real hours into, and I'd say no. But feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, especially if you're a big Zelda fan, cause I'm honestly not. And that is my list. Any games out there that everyone says they're RPGs but you think are not, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!